She was sitting in seat 3A drinking coffee. Old jeans. Gray hoodie. Nobody looked at her twice. Then both engines died. Zero fuel. Complete silence at 34,000 feet. Tower said landing was impossible. Until she picked up the radio and said 3 words. Call sign Phantom. The Boeing 737 carrying 156 passengers from Dallas to Chicago had been in the air for 91 minutes when the fuel warning light came on. Not a low fuel caution. A full emergency alarm. Both fuel gauges were dropping at the same time, fast, much faster than any normal flight would ever show. Captain David Marsh stared at the instruments. He checked again. He switched to the backup reading. The numbers were real and they were terrible. Nobody in the cabin knew yet. The passengers were reading, sleeping, watching movies on small screens. It was a Tuesday morning. The sky was clear. There was no reason for anyone to feel afraid. In seat 3A, near the window, a woman named Karen Ellis was drinking coffee and looking at the flat land below. She was 41 years old. She had short brown hair and wore a gray hoodie and old jeans. She looked like someone returning home after visiting family. Tired. Ordinary. Unremarkable. The businessman beside her had glanced at her once after boarding and not looked again. The flight attendant had brought her coffee and moved on. Nobody paid attention to Karen Ellis. There was nothing about her that asked for attention. What nobody on that aircraft knew was that Karen had spent 16 years in the United States Army flying combat aircraft. She had flown AH-64 Apache helicopters and UH-60 Black Hawks on missions in places most people would never visit. She had flown in complete darkness. She had flown with ground fire coming up at her from below. She had brought aircraft home with damage that should have made flying impossible. Her call sign was Phantom. Her squadron commander had given it to her on her 3rd deployment because she could fly through situations that should have killed her and come out the other side like she was never there. She had retired 8 months ago to be close to her sick father in Chicago. This flight was supposed to be simple. In the cockpit, Captain Marsh and First Officer Linda Yip were working fast. The fuel system was failing at a deep mechanical level. A valve had failed in a way that was draining both tanks simultaneously. They tried every procedure available. Nothing stopped the loss. In approximately 7 minutes, the engines would flame out. Captain Marsh got on the radio. His voice was controlled but tight. Chicago Center, American 519 declaring fuel emergency. Both tanks critical. We are at 34,000 feet, 80 miles southwest of O'Hare. Requesting immediate emergency clearance. The controller came back fast. American 519, cleared direct O'Hare. All traffic cleared from your path. Emergency services notified. Marsh ran the numbers. At the rate fuel was draining, the engines would stop before they reached O'Hare. The math was not close. The math was clear. 4 minutes later, the left engine flamed out. The aircraft yawed left. Marsh corrected. He tried the restart procedure. The engine did not respond. 40 seconds after that, the right engine went quiet. The cockpit was suddenly very still. No engine noise. Just wind against the fuselage and soft warning beeps. Both engines out, Marsh said into the radio. We are a glider. Altitude 19,000 feet and descending. Request vectors to any runway within glide range. Request military assistance immediately. In the cabin, passengers had felt both engines go. The first loss had made people look up. The second had made hands grip armrests. A flight attendant named Marcus came over the PA and told everyone to fasten their seatbelts and sit upright. His voice was professional. But people heard something underneath the words. The crying started in row 12. Then row 19. A man in row 7 was looking at his phone, at a photo of his children, and not looking away. In seat 3A, Karen Ellis had not been sleeping. She felt the first engine go and her eyes opened. She felt the second engine go and she was already calculating altitude, airspeed, glide ratio, terrain below, wind direction. 16 years of flying had made that kind of thinking automatic. She looked out the window. She recognized the geography. She had flown over this part of the Midwest many times during training exercises. She knew where they were. She knew how far a 737 could glide from 19,000 feet. And she knew that O'Hare was not reachable. But she also knew something else. Rockford Airport was 31 miles ahead. Runway 01 was over 10,000 feet long. Flat terrain on the approach. If the aircraft was flown with precision, if the glide angle was managed exactly right from this moment, the numbers worked. Not comfortably. But they worked. She thought for 3 seconds. Then she stood up. The flight attendant Marcus intercepted her immediately. "Ma'am, please return to your seat." "I need to speak to the captain right now," Karen said. "My name is Karen Ellis. I am a retired Army aviator, 16 years of service, Black Hawk and Apache qualified, over 3,400 flight hours including dead stick emergency landings." "Tell him that exactly." Marcus looked at her face. Something in her voice and her eyes was not the voice and eyes of a frightened passenger. He turned and knocked on the cockpit door. 20 seconds later Karen was inside. Captain Marsh turned and looked at her. He was a 27-year veteran. He had no interest in who she was. He had 156 people and no engines and needed information. "Talk," he said. "Rockford Airport," Karen said immediately. "Runway 01, 31 miles ahead, 10,000 feet of runway, flat approach. Your current altitude and glide speed give you the range if you begin a 7-degree course correction in the next 60 seconds. After that the geometry closes and you lose the runway. Tell me your current glide ratio." Marsh told her. She looked at the instruments for 4 seconds. "The numbers work," she said. "But only if the turn starts now." Marsh looked at Yip. Yip nodded once. Marsh looked back at Karen. "Right seat," he said. Karen sat down. She keyed the radio. Her voice was flat and professional. "Chicago Center, this is American 519. I am Karen Ellis, Army Aviation Corps retired, call sign Phantom, assisting on the flight deck. We are not proceeding to O'Hare. We are executing a dead stick approach to Rockford Airport runway 01. Request Black Hawks diverted to Rockford immediately. Please confirm." There was a pause. Then a military frequency opened alongside the civilian channel. A firm voice came through. "American 519, this is Black Hawk Flight Kilo 2, 2 aircraft, currently 11 miles from your position. We have you on radar. Confirm your call sign." Karen pressed transmit. "Kilo 2, this is Phantom. Confirmed. Escort our approach and keep runway 01 clear. We are coming in with no power and no go around. One shot. Get emergency services rolling to Rockford now." A pause. Then the Black Hawk pilot's voice came back with something in it. Not surprise. Something more like recognition. The way one pilot sounds when they realize they are talking to someone who has stood in the same place they are standing. "Phantom, Kilo 2. We have you. Runway will be clear. You are not alone." Karen began flying. A 737 with no engine power does not respond like a military helicopter. It is heavy. It descends faster than you want. It turns slowly. But the principles do not change regardless of the aircraft. You find the energy the machine has and you use every bit of it. You do not fight the aircraft. You work with it. She held the nose at the precise angle that gave maximum glide distance. She used the wind. She talked to Captain Marsh in short clear sentences before each action so he could follow and correct her if she was wrong. She was not too proud to be corrected. She did not expect to be. At 11,000 feet she could see Rockford in the distance. A small cluster of runways in flat farmland. She could see the two Black Hawks flanking the aircraft on both sides, holding formation, matching her speed, staying with her all the way down. At 6,000 feet she configured for landing. Gear down. Flaps to approach setting. Airspeed coming back toward the target range. Captain Marsh ran through the checklist items. Yip monitored the instruments. The three of them worked together with the focus of people who had accepted the situation completely and were thinking only about the next 8 minutes. At 2,500 feet Rockford runway 01 was straight ahead. Long and wide and clear. Emergency vehicles were already positioned on both sides of the taxiway, lights flashing red and white in the morning sun. Someone in the tower had believed her. At 500 feet Karen said, "I have the runway. I have the numbers. Hold everything steady." At 200 feet she began the flare. She pulled back gently on the yoke, raising the nose, reducing the descent rate. The aircraft slowed. The ground came up fast. The main wheels touched with a solid double thump. The aircraft settled onto the runway. Karen pressed full brakes immediately, hard and steady, because without engine reverse thrust the brakes were all they had. The aircraft shook with deceleration. Runway markers flashed past the windows. Emergency vehicles began moving alongside. The aircraft stopped with 580 feet of runway remaining. For 2 seconds nobody in the cabin made a sound. Then it came all at once. Not screaming. Something else. Something that had been held very tightly inside 156 people for the last 9 minutes and was now releasing completely. People grabbed each other. People cried. The man from row 7 had his face in his hands. Captain Marsh sat in his seat with both hands flat on his legs and looked straight ahead at the stopped runway for a long moment. Then he turned to Karen. He did not speak immediately. He looked at her the way you look at something you cannot fully explain. "Phantom," he said quietly. Karen nodded once. She set the parking brake. She checked the stopped aircraft configuration. Then she stood up, gave Marsh a brief nod, and walked back into the cabin. She did not stop to receive applause. She did not raise her hand. She walked to seat 3A, sat down, and looked out the window at the flat morning outside. The two Black Hawks were landing on the taxiway beside the runway, rotors still turning, the pilots climbing down to check on the aircraft. The woman across the aisle was staring at her. "Was that you? Were you flying?" Karen looked at her for a moment. "Captain Marsh landed the aircraft," she said. "He never lost control of the situation." She turned back to the window. Her father was waiting in Chicago. She would get there a few hours late. She would not tell him about the flight. She would sit with him in his kitchen and drink his bad coffee and listen to him talk, and that would be enough. Outside, the Black Hawk pilots were walking across the tarmac toward the aircraft. One of them looked up at the windows as he walked. Karen watched him for a moment. Then she finished the last of her cold coffee and set the cup down on the tray table. Phantom had come home.